On one of my daily deep dives down the rabbit hole of TikTok, I stumbled across a particularly interesting video. Now, I'm going to play this audio for you, and I invite you to follow along to its instructions very carefully.
15-second personality test I learned in Russia. Try to answer every question quickly without thinking about it too much. Question number 1. If you were any animal in the world, what animal or what living creature would you be? Remember, just say the first thing that comes to mind. Question number 2. Pretend that animal doesn't exist. Who would you be then? Remember, don't think too much. And the last question, pretend that animal also doesn't exist. Who would you be then? So now you should have identified 3 animals, and here the results. Your first response is how you want to appear to people. So if you chose someone like a tiger or a lion, you want to appear strong and independent. Your second animal is how people actually see you. So if you chose a dog, for example, people see you as friendly, loyal, and cute. And your third answer is who you actually are.
Well, that was that. And just to share, nobody asked, but my answers were dolphin, whale, then jellyfish. Ouch. And I know this personality test is probably not the most scientifically accurate. I mean, at the end of the day, I did get it off of TikTok. So you may be wondering, Solaia, why did you play this for us, especially considering that you're supposed to be giving us a very dramatic and inspirational talk right now? The truth is that, yes, me being my very dramatic self, this TikTok triggered in me a plethora of questions like dominoes. Do I really want to be perceived as a dolphin? Do you guys really perceive me as a whale? Deep down, am I really a jellyfish? So are we really being our true selves, whatever that means on social media or in real life? Do we control how we want to be seen? Am I constantly trying to reinvent myself? What makes up who we are? Is identity a construction? And most importantly, who do you think you are? This question struck a chord in me because all of a sudden, my research into an artist's work finally clicked. This artist is Cindy Sherman. If I were to fangirl over one person for my whole life, it would be this woman on the screen right here. Some of you are probably thinking that this is not a very stereotypically good-looking photograph. But I'm here to tell you that Cindy Sherman is actually one of the most influential photographers or artists in recent decades. In fact, this photograph of hers sold in auction for $3.9 million US, the most expensive photograph to date. But peel away her art's commercial value, peel away its looks, her art, it all boils down to one fact, that her thought-provoking artworks are incredibly relevant in today's self-obsessed generation. Now, I'm a strong believer in the notion of art being a window into society, a framework, a catalyst, if you will, to ask the big questions. Art is a tool that is more than useless. Sorry, Oscar Wilde. So today, I will be using Cindy Sherman's photographs as a lens to reframe self-perception and the layers of the self in the age of the selfie. Cindy Sherman, she grew up in a strict and religious home under the control of an overbearing father. And as a means to escape her often grim reality of hers, she found a special comfort in costume and makeup. Escapism, make-believe, imagining, pretending, as children do. She moved to New York in the 70s, but continued to dress up in these costumes at social occasions as a way to divert attention away from herself, in a way to combat her often crippling shyness. From what previously was a childhood quirk, quickly became some sort of armor she put on daily. And it was that inspired her to start photographing herself in these costumes as an art project. Since then, so-called dress-up has become a cornerstone, the purpose, a key practice in her work. What she would do is that she would create these fictional characters by manipulating her appearance, throwing on a costume, some makeup, and then snapping a photograph of herself, posing as that character. In other words, her face, her body was her canvas. She steps into the personality of a cowgirl, a clown, a corpse, if it even has a personality. The list just goes on and on. She is a true chameleon of her time. Given that growing up, I've always loved playing dress up, looking at Sherman's photographs to me are like looking into a candy store full of ideas. Note that in these photographs, she never uses a model. It is always her. And while her artworks always feature herself, they can barely even be defined as self-portraits, because in each picture, Sherman is in a completely different disguise, playing the part of a completely different person. All these are her, but not truly her at once. They are a persona. To me, it was her acts of stepping into these personas that questioned my very own view and identity. Her untitled film stills of the late 70s is a series she created that shows herself pose in the guises of very stereotypical stock female film characters. From a chic starlet trying to keep away from paparazzi to a girl on the run, her idea was to portray a moment, just a single frame in an old Hollywood film. By inserting herself in such roles, Sherman inserts herself into a dialogue encompassing stereotypical portrayals of women in the media. In these unnervingly accurate embodiments, this series almost serves as an encyclopedia of cut and paste female tropes and types. They're also incredibly ambiguous, given that they are all titled Untitled, leaving us, the viewer, in a way to cast our own narratives on them. Perhaps it also makes us wonder who the spectator of this image is. The women portrayed in these images seem to be under some sort of gaze, oftentimes what is called the male gaze. Regardless, they do not just act as passive entities. They are very much in control of the dialogue of the image. It is as if they have their own life outside of this so-called gaze. And this might be even a little bit of a stretch, but her characters are often looking at something beyond the lens, evoking the feeling of an estrangement from the self. Maybe the English student in me is coming through a little bit too much, but at the end of the day, what I took away from these pictures is that her subjects see, but are much more seen. Can we parallel this with our culture today? I'd like to speak particularly about Untitled Film Still number 2. The subject is wrapped in a bathrobe in what looks like a wig, gazing intensely into a mirror. She looks at the mirror with a certain desire, with a certain will. It is as if she wants this image to be reflected into the mirror to be as pretty as possible, to project a beauty that may not even be there. And it makes me so sad to look at this image because it makes me question, gosh, what has society done to her that makes her so self-obsessed with her image? What drives this desire of hers? And can we see this desire being reflected in our world today? On another note, I love how she lets the wig be a wig, in that she lets it look unnatural. So Sherman, she lets these flaws in costume design slide, which is a constant reminder that this is nothing but a vision trick, a dress-up, a facade. So much of contemporary mass culture, including social media, play on this very concept of desire. A desire to be one's most beautiful self, or even a desire to be a whole other person. Through her art, Cindy Sherman announces that it is this very concept that is her space of play. That space between the actual and the desired, reality and fiction. Mimicry in nature was first observed in butterflies. This butterfly, please. Anyway, this butterfly that's supposed to be, that butterfly is pretending to be an owl. Quite frankly, a desire for survival alone couldn't account for the straight-up freakishness of this camouflaging act. In a way, nature is playing a constant game of intricate enchantment and deception. Sure, Cindy Sherman is also playing this game through her art, but what about us? Are we playing this game too? Now, you've probably heard this a million times before, but I'm going to say it again and be a menace. We live in a world where everyone is consumed by technology. We are practically breathing in a world that has become so self-obsessed because, well, social media constantly perpetuates content and information that revolves around the self. I'm assuming that the vast majority of you do have an Instagram account, or a couple, or perhaps more than a couple, but in these spaces, you have creative freedom over what you post, what you put out into the world. Now, I also have an Instagram account, around 7 actually, but I realized that in these spaces, on my profiles, I hold immense power. That power to construct a certain image of myself, of my life, of my aesthetic, of my hobbies, in a way to invent. As cliche as it is, I could say that I found myself on social media, because it is my playground. It gave me the space to figure out who I was. Sherman's fluid constructions of herself seem to predict today's obsession with digital identities, digital self-representation, and so-called selfie culture. She is constantly experimenting. But she has had her fair share of opinions about selfies. She said, "The thing I hate most about selfies is the way most people are just trying to look a certain way." Wait a second. But isn't that what she's been kind of doing all along? Trying to look a certain way? Isn't she contradicting herself here? Let's think back to that TikTok I forced you to sit through and cringe through in the beginning. It asks you how you want to be seen, how people actually see you, and who you really are. There are stark parallels between these questions and the questions that Sherman's work raise. She intricately constructs an identity to be photographed and put on display. She warps other people's perception of who that character she's playing is. In other words, she is presenting us with a persona. In the context of her art, this persona is satirical. The difference with us is that the personas that we put on in selfies on social media, they're not satirical. We're being genuine. I recently came across, previous slide, sorry. I previously came across this diagram called the eye complex, which was the previous slide. It was by Caroline McHugh, and it shows us the layers of ourself very much like the layers of an onion, starting from the outer shell, perception, which is what everybody else thinks of you, and then the second shell, which is the persona, which is what you'd like other people to think of you, and then the ego, which is what you think of yourself, and then at the very core, the self, just you. As not only does the eye complex show us humans as complex beings, but from this diagram, one could infer that it is the personas that the butterflies, that Cindy Sherman and we ourselves are manipulating in order to be perceived in a certain way. Therefore, it is the outer two shells that we're manipulating. Social media presents a very warped perception of who we are. To me, it is an amalgamation of who we desire to be. Like Cindy Sherman's photographs are a play on identity, a selfie is a play, social media is a play. In some ways, identity is a construction that you can stretch and change. Our bodies are architecture. Like the woman in Untitled Film Still No. 2, like Cindy Sherman, I, as well as so many other people, are constructing a certain image of ourselves to be presented to the world. But above all, Cindy Sherman's work reminds me that there is no abstract nature that one is destined to fill. Instead, each one of us simply are in the world. What will we be then is entirely up to us. Being human simply means having the capacity to create our own essence in time. And not only does her work reflect things like social media, but it also reflects things like gender and the notion of it being a construction, performative, prosthetic. In some ways, I won't know what a selfie is, or what social media is for that matter, without Cindy Sherman's work as a reminder, as a constant signal that it is a play. It is a play between the actual and desired, reality and fiction, enchantment and deception. Her work so brilliantly holds a mirror up to our society, as she explores our ever-changing, superficial, abject, aspirational, and society-obsessed selves, in which, she said, masks the life that we put on daily, asking us, is there an inherent me, or is this all a show I'm putting on? So now, I want to ask again, who do you think you are? But not in a condescending or sarcastic way, but genuinely, who do you think you are? Because this might be at once the most simple yet difficult questions ever. And it is the very question that Cindy Sherman asked us in her art. Now, I'm not expecting any of us to have an answer to this question because humanity itself has constantly been looking for its answer, whether that be through science, literature, philosophy, psychology. Maybe there really isn't an answer to this question. In many ways, I think I have left you with a little bit too many questions, more questions than answers. But, I'm no artist, I'm no art historian or psychologist or philosopher, but in my very amateur student perspective, I think that we can all take away something from Cindy Sherman's photographs, whether that be an aha moment, a realization, eureka, a question about ourselves, or perhaps even a question about our world. Because great art always reflects back on society. Great art always asks the unanswerable questions. I'd like to end this on the story about Cindy Sherman. So while she was in an interview, she wanted to show the interviewer something on her phone. So naturally, she picked up her phone and tried unlocking it using Face ID, but it just wouldn't unlock. So naturally, She began readjusting and repositioning her face. She raised her eyebrow, she tilted her chin, and she gazed into the camera wide and held the phone very still until her phone finally unlocked. I guess what she was trying to do here was that she was trying to look like herself.